So welcome everyone. Hello, I should say hola, because this conversation we're celebrating Cinco de Mayo with a very, very, very special guest. Her name is Bárbara Sibley, and I've actually just met her not that long ago. Barbara and I are members of Les Dames Escoffier, which I am so proud to be a member now. Barbara's been a dame for many years. She's even been on the board. But this whole table is a tribute to Mexico and to her. Barbara was born and raised in Mexico City. I've had the privilege of visiting Mexico City also. And you can see our table here. There's lots of exuberant flowers, I'll say. We have lots of iconic figures and things from the wonderful country of Mexico and its food. And I did want dahlias, I have to say. I was telling him that that's the national flower of Mexico. But at this time of year, it's all out of season here. So if I wasn't so busy with other things, I said I would start raising dahlias or importing them. I just find them absolutely so stunningly beautiful. So I'll tell you a little bit about Barbara while she's coming on. But as I said, she was born and raised in Mexico, and now she is the CEO and chef and owner of La Palapa restaurants in New York. So here she is, and thank you, Barbara. So she's on.
Hi, good to see
Hi.
you.
Wonderful. I was just saying, I mean, you have this most illustrious bio and resume, so I can't read it all because I want people to go and explore it and see your bio. But there's a couple of things that I was saying. You were born and raised in Mexico City, and you and I first met at your restaurant in the East Village, but you have a number of them. But I think I was so gobsmacked in the beginning. I just didn't expect this beautiful white woman to own this Mexican restaurant. And then during the dinner, you described your life, and I was just so fascinated by it that I couldn't wait to host you. So cheers to you. Thank you for
Cheers,
coming
cheers.
on. And we enjoyed some delicious tequila at your restaurant. And I've read here that you had a pioneering agave cocktail program in the use of infusions and flavors in tequila. So I'm going to get back to that in a second. But first, I did want to ask you, so when you were, growing up in Mexico and you had all these sort of famous friends and people that you grew up with there, so tell us maybe a little bit about that, and then why you came to New York and that you chose to be in the restaurant business.
Right. Well, the 60s was a very extraordinary place in Mexico City. There were so many artists. And so when my parents moved there, my mother's a painter, my father's an engineer, but really they fell in love with the country. And we lived in a place called San Angel, and it just turned out that we were really at the center of the artistic world. Diego Rivera's studio was 2 blocks from our house. And, my sister and I played with Pedro, Diego, and Ruth, his grandchildren. And we went to a small school where people came from all over the world. And, we're part of an artistic, creative world that was just, it just was a great place to grow up. Really went to school with people from 30 different nationalities.
Wow.
And my parents really wanted to make sure that we had our English. But really, my first language really is a mixture of both. I'm most comfortable when I can switch back and forth between Spanish and English. And so really, it was a time also in Mexico that was very closed economically. It was very before NAFTA. So I grew up in a very Mexican Mexico. So even if we were people from all over, and also there are many, many kinds of Mexicans. I mean, Mexico is a very diverse, complex society. And so we really grew up in a Mexico before there was much influence from the outside and from the United States. There was no McDonald's, obviously this is before NAFTA, before the internet. Everything was dubbed or so it took a while to get a movie because it would have to have subtitles and so on and so forth. So really, even culturally, it was quite isolated from the rest of the world because of the economic policies. So really, even though I have really English is very comfortable with, and I've been in New York for many, as we say in Mexico, when I came to New York, me vine un ratito y me quedé un ratote. So I came to New York for a little while, and I ended up staying my life. But
I'm
but
so
kids have,
jealous that you learned, so many languages. I think as Americans, we don't study language early enough. I learned French and Spanish in high school, then it goes away, but then through work, and I do study Spanish every day. I've worked in Ecuador and, traveled and done garden design and menu development there, but it's a struggle, I think, as you get older to learn. So you have children, right?
yes, I have
Yeah.
a daughter and a son,
Do
and
you teach them, or do they
I
learn?
do. They especially when they were little. I would say because it's not taught in schools in the States as young, it's harder. It's honestly, as soon as your kids go to school, it's a little harder to keep the language going. They both excelled in it, but I think both of them are upset with me that they're not perfectly fluent.
Oh,
But it is hard when you're not in the country.
yes.
And with the pandemic, we all thought that we would be spending a lot more time in Mexico, but then couldn't travel. So it's they have a lot of Spanish, and I always laugh. They love it. When they go to Mexico, they love to just go to the tortilladora and have
Oh,
the go to the window and have the tortilla making lady like just give them a tortilla with a little bit of salt, and that's what they always want to do as soon as they arrive in Mexico City. So I know I've done something right.
absolutely. So let me ask, as a woman, as the CEO, and you're the chef and owner of, I think, many restaurants in New York, three restaurants and catering and so on. But how do you balance family life and work life? And
Well, there's a few things. I'm really, really fortunate in that everything is close by. As we know, in New York, that's not always the case. A lot of people ask me, it's like, oh, well, do you like living next to work? And I was like, well, if I didn't, I would really need to be in a different business because things come up all the time. I'm able to come down. For instance, when you came down to dinner, I was able to come down and spend the evening with you, and then come home and cook dinner and do whatever else, take care. I'm also very fortunate that my husband has really had worked in the restaurant business, and he totally understands. So when I tell him, hey, I've got a VIP at La Palapa, I've got to go down, or if I tell him it's 3 o'clock in the morning and we just had a pipe burst, there's other parts of it that are not just social. He
right.
understands. He understands, and it's so we work as a team, and it's supportive. And my kids love the restaurant; they're very attached to it. As I say, I'm glad they love the food still because we obviously eat there quite a lot. And so it's putting things together. And I always say, when you're busy, I mean, it's just time goes fast, and you do what you have to do.
It sure
It's
does.
all works.
It's sort of a lesson. So, do you think your children will go into your business?
I don't know. I don't know. They both really love it, but I don't know that they have the passion for it that I do. And that passion wasn't automatic. I mean, I always was cooked. I was a very shy kid. I loved to be in the kitchen all the time. I'm one of those people that can remember the very first time I had an avocado and I said, "Cómo se llama?" It's like, "¿Qué es esto?" I was, what is it called? I know that, I could taste, remember tastes. So for me, it's something that's very much a part of something that I loved. And even though I studied anthropology, I was most interested in the development of food sustainability systems. I studied it in Mexico and also in Ecuador, like archaeologically, and in India. And so so for me, nothing is lost. Everything all comes together. But I've always had a passion for food.
I was just going to ask you about the anthropology element of your studies, and how do you think that informs because I mean, I'm so fascinated with you and what you've done, and I'm going to ask you about community in a minute, but how you think the anthropology, it seems like I mean, I respect chefs and cooks and so on so much, and food industry, I'm involved in it, but you just seem to have such a a broader outlook when it comes to the food. Do you think your anthropology helped infuse your passion for it, that you're actually helping people understand a culture?
Well, I think definitely because of my Mexican background and then coming to New York and really being faced with the stereotypes and realizing that if I didn't educate and if I didn't explain to New York what the deeper Mexico was all about and the flavors and the culture and the richness of,
Mhm.
of the literature and the music, I think that if that sort of became my mission as well, because
Mhm.
when I was faced with a lot of stereotype uh, bias here, and there is to this day, I always laugh that if I could write my menu in French, I could charge 30% more,
I
because
know.
everyone says, this taco should be cheap, and I'm like, it's the same steak that you're, it's a filet mignon if you have it, if or a filete.
Mhm.
There is sort of a business bias there that you come across, but I've always felt it's very important for me to share that part of my Mexico with New
Do,
Yorkers, and it's very exciting for me to see more and more New Yorkers open to that and understanding how complex and
do
rich it
you
is.
do you think you've made some inroads, or how do you sort of calculate or view that?
Well,
Like,
it's interesting. There are things on menus in New York that are particular to me that have become standards. I opened La Palapa 23 years ago. 23 years ago, we couldn't get a lot of things in New York. So my
mm,
everything, at La Palapa, I make my own cheese, I make my own crema, my own chorizo, all my own moles, all my own. And on any given day, there are maybe 30 different salsas that we're
wow.
serving. And so it is always funny and interesting for me to see dishes that when I had them on the menu, people were like, duck in a Mexican restaurant. I was like, of course, duck. Ducks are indigenous to the Americas.
Mm,
Chickens are not.
mm,
So, in terms of the anthropology and teaching, and I do have felt that it's like that. I teach every meal I serve is a lesson in some respects, right? But I also teach classes, and having a cookbook gave me great joy to be able to teach those recipes. That was sort of an unexpected bonus, so to just really enjoy. Yes, there it is, teaching those recipes, and those recipes come from home recipes and then went to the restaurant and then went back to sort of a home scale in the book.
I
Uh,
see.
so
I just
definitely
got
it's a mission.
I just got that. I think that was your first book, they said.
Yes.
So I just ordered, and it came, I think, yesterday. So Bill and I, our cameraman Marty Scorsese here, we cannot wait to dig into it. But
Great. Well, let
yeah,
me know if you need any ingredients or anything. You can always come and shop in my restaurant. I'll be happy to.
take you up on that. Do you find it somewhat easier to get the ingredients from compared to the early days?
Yes, definitely easier to get them now. I used to have to get them I bring a lot of things up in my suitcase, honestly. My mother would, and my sister would. Chiles and achiote and piloncillo, which is sort of like a raw sugar that's, very different from regular brown sugar and is, a key
I know
ingredient.
this. Yes,
So,
I know this. They had that in Ecuador. That's so funny you mentioned that.
yeah,
I mean,
in the
you, one of the things you also talked about, I mean, New York is so diverse, so it sort of made sense to me now that you're explaining it, how culturally diverse Mexico City was when you grew up there. And I mean, I've always believed as a New Yorker, how wonderfully diverse Manhattan, New York City, all the boroughs are. So it sort of doesn't, so that sort of links, so maybe you can talk about that. But also, you were saying how dedicated you are to community, not only through Les Dames Escoffier, but you work so much with so many local restaurants, and you've been awarded the High Road Award, and so many different accolades, and this share for breast cancer survivors, AMFAR. I mean, it goes on and on. I don't know where you get the time to do all this, but so tell us a little bit about your sense of dedication to your community as well.
yeah. I think that and as I said, like it all comes together. It also comes from the anthropology. I think that when you have a restaurant, you realize, you're really on the ground floor. You're in your community, the people that walk through your doors and the people you hire. you really come in contact, and you have sort of a responsibility of stewardship to respect and help the people that help you, and it's really sort of an ecosystem, right? And so I feel like it's my responsibility that comes with the privilege. I would say I have a great privilege that I get to choose all these wonderful people to share my work life with, right? I've an amazing team. I mean, I've worked with my chef Domingo since we were, kids, basically. I mean,
Really?
and his family. Yeah. From when I graduated from college, I've been working with his family, and my general manager, Judy. I mean, they're all so amazing. I have such an incredible team. People have been with me since the beginning of La Palapa, and even before that. And just recently I had someone who I hired when he was fresh out of high school that came by to see me. So you have a responsibility to your community and your employees, and then beyond that. And so the East Village, I really, for example, like during Sandy, we saved all the food. I knew the power was going out. I managed to pack my walk-in full of ice, and we were in the dark for almost a week. And so we served the community. We had big buffets, and we cooked everything off, and we served people in the dark. And especially, for instance, like police officers that were patrolling, it was completely dark down here in the village during Sandy. And even 9/11, we were also once again below 14th Street. So we were feeding the fire houses that were going to go and dig through the rubble, and we would take food to them. And then during the pandemic, those same tables that I did made food for the firehouses and police precincts during 9/11. We started making food for the hospitals and hospital workers and homebound seniors, which was a wonderful community to help, who were homebound in assisted living, meals for them and for Covenant House. I still, to this day, through partnership with the Gotham organization, make a weekly meal for the kids up at Covenant House. It's sort of they like something steady, and we like to provide that. And so it's something that it's such a privilege to be able to do what you love. And I feel like we have a responsibility to each other, and I'm just very happy that I can help my community.
I feel like we should all back you, because that is that passion that you display is just so very inspiring. And I think that's what the viewers look for, to say, how can I do all this? Everyone feels, just weak with the burden of daily life. And here you've been able to, sort of scaffold a way to incorporate work, family, your passion, your community. And then again, in addition, the arts. I mean, you're a woman after my own heart, because I think art transforms us in so many ways. I often said when I first started Ladies Who Lunch Conversations, that ideas have agency, and we need to be together or share ideas in order to help, sort of promote all of these things. And I just want to take a few minutes, if you can, tell us about, I love this. You are the co-director and founder with your sister Jennifer Clement of this San Miguel Poetry Week conference that you, I guess, started in San Miguel de Allende. Yeah. So people don't know that much about poetry to begin with anymore, and yet it wasn't in the too distant past that some of our greatest poets here. I mean, I've done gardens, filled with verses of poetry and so on, but that used to excite people so much. So how does what you and your sister do sort of incorporate that sense of excitement and passion for it?
Right. Well, we realized that that people wanted to come together, and it's been an incredible thing to do, because it's small every year. Obviously, with the pandemic, travel and organizing conferences has been complicated. But we started with Robert Hass and Yusef Komunyaka and W.D. Snodgrass. And my sister and I were like, well, this really has to happen. It was going to be wonderful. And basically, it was the kind of thing like, well, I have $500 to lose. Do you have $500 to lose? Sure. Okay, let's put out, I mean, that's how things start. You have to do them, And
Gotta go.
She and I have done this together for so many years, and she is such an inspiration to me. But uh, we've just had a great time doing it. For me, it was wonderful to do something also in Mexico while I was here, because I've missed being in Mexico, and it was wonderful to be able to do something that was making a difference. So it's been hundreds of poets over the years, hundreds of amazing faculty: Stephen Dunn, Mark Doty, Caroline Duffy. I could go on and on. Just so many amazing poets. And San Miguel is an extraordinary place. San Miguel de Allende is a beautiful, beautiful place to come together, and really, once again, sort of shepherd people's art and provide a space where people could take time out of their lives and dedicate themselves only to their art. In the both the faculty and the participants, and then every night, at the end of each conference, at the end of each week, there's a poetry reading where everyone reads one poem. Everyone that's associated with it. I read a poem. My sister, every faculty, and it's alphabetical, so it's very much like a leveling of the playing field in the creativity. So all the participants, everyone can reads a poem one after the other. So you can imagine it's 40. It's an hour and it's 40 poets. Poem after poem after poem. It's a really extraordinary evening. And so it's just been a great honor to do this, but also just, I say, to provide a place where people could come together to just dedicate themselves to their art, has been wonderful.
So when they read their poems, can others see it, or is it just only live there? The reason why I ask is one of my last guests, she does a salon or a salon once a month with music. You can be there live in Philadelphia, but you can also, she provides like a Zoom link so that people can attend that way. So I'm wondering, can others hear the poetry readings?
Well, we haven't really done that because that's sort of something that's come now during the pandemic, which, as I said, like travel and small classes. We did do some virtual reading. We did a virtual one in 2021, that people could join virtually. In San Miguel itself, there is such a vibrant artistic community. In fact, when W.S. Merwin came, he had just premiered, done the book launch premiere reading at Cooper Union. And he was so amazed that when he came to San Miguel in Bellas Artes, there were more people in the audience in Mexico than there had been in New York.
Wow.
Because San Miguel is a very vibrant, I mean, they even have their own pen center. I mean, San Miguel is a really vibrant artistic community. So we always do the readings in a theater with an audience for also the community of San Miguel de Allende.
I see. I have not been there, but now you're seducing me to go visit there. I mean, I studied.
You'll love it.
I would love it. I know with the arts is everything to me, but I did study in Cuernavaca. I did visit Mexico City and loved it, and we've been to, a lot of the beaches and things. But it's just, to me, Mexico is so rich. And going back to your food and the tequila, I find it so interesting that so few countries have a spirit that is so closely associated with them. There's pisco for Peru or sake in Japan, but, having tequila, I mean, I know from being a horticulturist and a garden designer, like those agaves can only grow there and they only have certain pollinators, that makes it special. But maybe you can tell a little bit, about your experience with the tequila and how you've helped others sort of develop their spirits.
It's very interesting to me because and part of being a business owner and being interested just in the anthropology, I'm always very interested in marketing and how products, since La Palapa is such really, we're really like, we were pioneers. So we're a great place for people to come and test their new products. So routinely, folks who are starting a new line or importing a new product will come and test it at La Palapa and Alaska. So if we can try it, taste it on us, and then see if we'll buy it. So it's been very interesting to see the change in tequilas, the change where it's like for a long time they were trying to market tequilas that were sort of trying to change a tequila into a vodka, for example, or, over distill it. But now, and then you started to have mezcales. And so I would have to say that I'm, one of the people that's really responsible for mezcal, which is
Thank you, gracias.
starting to come into the country, into New York, and to really run that. Because when I saw that there was one importer of real mezcal, which is Del Maguey, I was running a British pub at the time, sort of one of the very first gastro pubs, and I said, like, I'm buying this. We're putting this mezcal on. I know, I don't care that it isn't really relevant. It's so extraordinary to have a real mezcal in the United States. And now that's what they have. And actually, I'm drinking a mezcal.
Me too, but yours looks better than mine. But you just, did you know, or just intuitively know? Because people study tequilas and mezcals, they're just so nuanced.
Right. There's such a nuance, but I would have to say that it just came to me naturally because I lived it. So, I lived going, in Mexico, tasting it in Mexico. It was always like a, broad understanding of the spirit, just as if you were in Scotland, and you were growing up with, Scotch, you would taste, and you would go to someone's home and they would have something else. And, it's not something forced, can I say, perhaps. Yeah. It's just something natural. I think that also, once again, in terms of the teaching, it's been very interesting and important to me to teach people. Long ago, people would be like, "Oh, I'll have a shot. I'll have tequila," and then like just down the shot without tasting, savoring the spirit as one should. So I find it very exciting that there are more and more things are still marketed. I would say sometimes to a foreign market instead of just being true to the tequila and true to the roots. That happens in a lot of spirits. But for me, really, it was just an accumulation of my life.
Yeah, I think that's probably in people's DNA, that they can sort of feel that. But I'm excited. I mean, as you know, I wrote the book on the art of the garnish, and I feel that tequila has just, migrated away from that, like quick shot, and there's just more and more interesting drinks that mixologists like to use tequila for because of its taste. I mean, it's incredibly chameleon-like in a way, and it blends well with so many other things, which is kind of like the Mexican cuisine, I will say. If you had, do you have a favorite? I'm going to ask, do you have a favorite dish that you prepare, and do you have a favorite dish that you like to eat or serve?
You're asking me to choose among my children, you realize, right? I love mole. I love mole.
Oh my God, your mole was divine. Yeah. It was like insane. It's good.
Yeah, I just, and also because it's so nuanced and it's so different. It's slightly different every time. Mm-hmm. You can't not make two moles to be completely identical if you're just, because the chiles are always a little bit different. The fruit's a little bit different. You have so many natural flavors that have a slight variance. And so it's just really fun to play with that. And then we serve duck. So we've started using a little bit of duck fat in the mole. And that's added another flavor. So, it's just sort of taking the palate. And every time you make it, to me, just the smell of when we're toasting the mole and when we start to grind it, I just feel like I just want to just sit in a corner and just smell that and just absorb it. I love the mole.
That is, I love the way you describe it, because it's such a sensual treat. You're talking about like the aroma, the taste, the sound, like everything about that, the fragrance. That's absolutely beautiful. Wow, I'm still like in mole heaven there. Did, a quick, sort of a longer question, but a quick question. I was thinking, like I always try to promote eating with the seasons and what's fresh, but does Mexican cuisine have that, and do your restaurants have that, or is it more what's favorites and that you're going to serve the same? People want to see that.
I would say it's a combination. For one thing, for me, local, the definition of local is a little different. One of the awards I have is from a foundation that promotes, um, gives you distinguishes you as an authentic Mexican restaurant, because they're actually part of a foundation that's promoting the agriculture in the poor sections of Mexico, the
Mm,
Southwest, not the North, which is sort of like the breadbasket. That's where the chiles and tomatoes and onions and wheat are grown. But the Southwest, where you have hibiscus flowers, cactus, guayabas, all these different tamarinds, different crops that are more subsistence, and where the farmer needs more support.
mm,
And so there is that mission also, in that when you do uh, make a recipe that comes from those areas of Mexico, you're actually supporting local economies in an international way, perhaps, if I
mm-hmm.
could say.
Yep.
Um, and I think that that's important, because the folks that are growing the jalapenos, onions, and tomatoes are doing great. The people that are having to farming these other crops, special chiles that come from Oaxaca, for example, special heirloom corn to do the nixtamal. All of these things support small local economies, and especially women cultivators.
Right,
And
right.
so it's very, very important. I find, to me, that's just, I'm really thankful. So when folks talk about local, to me, that's my local in
Mm-hmm.
an interesting way. But there's also a whole area of cuisine which you will love. I mean, we should just do a festival together, because we would have so much fun. So there's a part of Mexican cuisine. It's really the Nahuatl, Mesoamerican Aztec cuisine, which is the quelites, which are sprouts. So it's really anytime. Mexico's really seasons are not so cold and hot, but more
Mm.
dry and rainy. And so there's a time when the rainy seasons come, and when everything starts to sprout. And so it's all wild greens, things like amaranth buds and leaves, and
Yeah.
quintoniles and quelites and flower buds, and even, for example, it's not exactly that, but maybe like a squash blossom would be part of it. So there's a whole cuisine based on, even, for example, the tendrils of a squash plant. They're called guías, and you make a delicious soup with sopa de guía. It's very traditional, and a lot of it is foraged, and a lot of it really comes from the milpa. The milpa is the cornfield. So very often every family would have their milpa, and then you have everything that grows around. It's really a wonderful. I mean, here in the United States, we talk about the three sisters.
Mm-hmm.
So it is that. So it's the cornfield and everything that grows along, where the farmers would grow beans and squash and calabazas or calabacitas. It's more like a lita squash. So what you have in Mexico, it's not a zucchini. Sort of more bitter, delicious squash. And so calabazas, and then in the also large calabazas, or like what we would call a winter squash as well, gourds, and then all the insects that live there as well,
Oh,
the
yeah. Yes.
caterpillar, the
Yeah.
worms, the grasshoppers, the chapulines, all of these things. This really comes from sort of a very rich uh, mixture of agriculture with foraging, with and just eating from your environment in a really rich way. And it's a very healthy, very, very healthy cuisine as well. It's delicious.
I saw that. I'm going to put that in the notes for this because Barbara has lectured on panels for the American Heart Association to create the awareness that this Mexican and Latin American foods is being healthy superfoods. So hold on to
Yeah.
your Mediterranean diet because we have another one coming up for you that you're going to
Well,
love because of all the spices and things. But I do love my Mediterranean friends, so I'm not going to say that. But so stay tuned.
And I always say delicious is universal. So,
Oh, I
and
love that.
Mexico is a country that's always been very happy to adopt anything delicious. Now we didn't have a lot of oil olives or a lot of grapes grown it during the 1600s, 1700s, 1800s, because Spain depended on those exports. And so in the Americas, you'll have very old like root stock for vines. Like in California, you have really, really hundreds and hundreds of year old rootstock, but they would be growing raisins and different things like that, and not as much wine production, and also not as much olive production or olive oil production, even though it was started in the Americas very, very early in the colonial era, because Spain counted on those exports for their economy. So that's, when you think about California wines, I mean, that's something that's really a big part of it.
Really old, really old. That's so fascinating. See, I can't stop learning from you. If you had to pick a favorite cocktail, what would it be?
Oh, well, for me, a tequila with sangrita is just like the best. To me, that's the best appetizer. So
Tequila.
sangrita so with tequila, sometimes you have you have to come back to La Palapa so we can have that. So tequila, you have a chaser, which is sort of like it's tomato, orange, and pomegranate based, usually with spice. And so you have a sip of tequila and a sip of this chase of this. It's called sangrita because it's red like blood. And in Mexico, they're not squeamish about those things. It's just life. And all of it is to be
It's like, wow.
savored and enjoyed. So you have
I've
a little red chaser, and they call it little blood. So it's sangrita and tequila and a lime. But mainly you have a sip of the tequila and a sip of the sangrita, one after the other. And it's the best way, especially like to start a late Mexico, you usually have a late lunch, like 2:00 or something. So that's the appetizer, and that's what opens your appetite for your meal.
Oh, so like aperitivo is sangrito.
Yeah,
Sangrito?
sangrita. So it's more savory, whereas an aperitivos, a lot of aperitivos have are amaro based.
Right.
Like, even if they're only lightly amaro, they're amaro
This is more
based.
savory, but you still have it before, but sangrita. So
Yeah,
then,
and with their tequila.
oh, I can't wait to see this. Yes, I'm definitely going to have this over. We're bringing friends over because from the botanical garden and some other friends in New York to eat at your place because I can't stop. The food is so good. But I also, what was I just going to ask? Oh, the name. So La Palapa, how did you name it? That's a little shack. Is that what it means?
It's a little shack. Well, a palapa is a palm thatched roof, so it can be anything from a little simple beach umbrella to a majestic, towering roof of palm thatch. So it's really the idea of a shelter.
Oh, okay.
Where more, and it is perhaps more beachy than La Palapa is. I mean, La Palapa itself is based on what it would be like if I opened a Mexican restaurant in Mexico City, maybe in the Condesa. The font, comes from the street signs in La Condesa. But so that was really like my inspiration. Like if I was opening it in Mexico, what would I do? That was sort of my guidepost, how I would make sure that I was true to myself.
I love it. So I have many, many more questions. I could keep talking, but one last question before we go, just because I know of your time and so on. But if you were telling someone today, like to go into like the restaurant business or, what you're doing, how would you help, instruct them or guide them? Like, what would you say?
Well, I think that, there's two things. It's important to have one's dream place, but it's also very important to be rooted in business because it is a business and it's important to know that, and so sometimes I've been with people that say, well, this is what I want to cook. I don't care. You also have to know what your guests want to eat and what the experience that they would like to experience. So that's what I would say is that really do a thorough business plan and also think about adding, because this is not always done, sustainability and equity in your business plan so that actually you're creating a business that can stay in business, but it can also be a good actor in the world.
That's excellent advice. Sorry, I have one more question.
Sure,
So,
of course.
when you went to escuela in Mexico City, today when
Mhm.
people think of Cinco de Mayo, they do think of margaritas and guacamole and things, but there's really a history behind it with the French. So, did you study that in school, or do you ever talk
Yeah,
about?
so sure, it commemorates the Batalla de Puebla, which is really not really talked about here in the United States, but it's really the a battle where the underdog won. So it was this. So when Napoleon conquered Europe, he installed a an emperor, and there was the French Emperor Maximilian, and there was the French army, and so a ragtag group of Mexicans in their white cotton, it's called calzon, their white cotton, peasant outfits with sticks and scythes and no weapons at all, managed to rout the French army in their fancy uniforms and guns and muskets, and they won the Batalla de Puebla. So it's really a story that commemorates and celebrates the underdog, and so it's a great battle. In Mexico, it's a very boring holiday. It's a military parade. But in Puebla, and many Poblanos have moved to the state, were some of the first waves, especially in restaurants, were people from Puebla. And in Puebla, it's a wonderful holiday. They do reenactments of it. And one of the things that the Mexican peasants did is they stole the bread. So they actually reenact battles where they steal baguettes. So it's
Oh,
actually it's very fun. But in Mexico City, more than anything, it was sort of a very boring parade. But uh,
well, I
but
think you
still,
and I.
it is a great holiday because
It
it celebrates
is.
the
And I
underdog.
like the way you say it's, celebrating the underdog. So I think with a little bit of history that goes with it and your background in the food, like what better way to celebrate the holiday than to talk about the true meaning of it or the history than the food and some great tequila drinks.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm so sorry to say that we're going to say goodbye. But this was just, you're
Salud.
salud. You're so interesting. You're so inspiring, and we thank you so, so, so much.
So thank you so much for having me here and being with the ladies who lunch and your wonderful, wonderful people that you've interviewed. It's such an honor to be a part of that group and to be here with you today. Thank you so much.
You're so kind to say that. Okay, ciao. Bye bye.
Bye bye.